Hello.
Hey.
Nice to meet
Nice
you.
to meet you
Welcome
too.
to East Midlands today.
Thank you.
Thanks for talking to us. First of all, The Hobbit. I understand that you first came across the book itself when you were a young boy. Can you sort of remember the impression the book made on you then?
Yeah, I was in primary school, and I had a teacher who read excerpts from The Hobbit at reading time, and I remember very clearly her doing Gollum's voice, and it got me really interested in the book. And I think it was one of the first books that I picked up alone and read from cover to cover, and it led me on to reading Lord of the Rings, which I did the same thing. I read from cover to cover. But I was also in a production of The Hobbit at the Alex Theatre in Birmingham. I think I played a wood elf dressed in a kind of knitted silver gown, and we spun around the stage eating grapes and drinking wine. So yeah, I had lots of access to Tolkien as a kid.
And for you then, because you obviously had an intimate knowledge, so to speak, of The Hobbit, when you first approached the part, what was it like inhabiting a world that you had inhabited in your mind, I suppose, as a young boy?
I mean, it's one of the best things about going to this kind of material, because you do remember how you felt about it as a young kid, and then coming back to it as an adult, you have to kind of tap into the imagination that you had when you were young, and that's what I find most exciting about it, because I think it's where my imagination was formed, was reading this kind of literature and this kind of fantasy. But coming back to it later on, I was much more aware of Tolkien as a writer, what he was writing, the experiences that he was writing about in his own life, and the fact that what he was writing about in a certain area of England, where he lived in Oxfordshire, became very specific to me in the book. I sort of saw it more clearly.
Mm. And you're the Prince of Dwarfs. There's nothing dwarf-like about you. What was it like? What we see on film, it's quite magical, really. How do you make that happen?
The magic is kind of the thing that Peter does very well. He gives you that sense of scale, the sense of location, and the world that he creates. He did make us bigger versions of ourselves, so that when we were reduced in the digital world, we didn't look like children running around. And I think that was one of the reasons that he hired kind of big guys like me, because he wanted us to look like heavy warriors. And actually, my scale double, Mark Aiken, who was a policeman from Derbyshire, I think he's something like 4 foot. No, he must be a bit taller than that. Maybe he's 5 foot, something like that. He's quite little, but even trying to get weight into him, and he was a bobby on the beat, but there was something about the weight of the dwarves. Tolkien described them as having really, really heavy bones, and they were like, iron bowling balls kind of down the battlefield. So I think that was, part of the thing that Peter wanted to achieve.
The appeal.
Yeah.
And in the film, there's obviously incredible action sequences, but you also sing as well. And I just wondered how much of a part growing up performing arts sort of was in your life.
I came to acting through a physical background, and then I kind of emerged into musical theatre prior to going to drama school. So I had some vocal training, which came in really useful when it was time to have Thorin sing. But I was really adamant that I didn't want him to sound like a trained singer. It's really interesting, because they're great singers, the dwarves, but they don't sound trained. And so I'd listened to quite a lot of Russian choral music just to find that bass sound, and tried to gravel my voice a little bit, so it just sounded like it was coming from somewhere really raw. But yeah, the ability to have an ear for that and to read music came in useful. I wanted more singing in The Hobbit, actually, because the book is littered with songs and poetry, and I wanted a little bit more.
And did you, because you played instruments, did you, when you were younger? Was it quite a musical family, or were you the exception?
We weren't a musical family, to be honest. But I remember there was a time when there was a lot of free music lessons in school, and the only instrument that was available was a cello. obviously I wanted something smaller and more portable, but I ended up with this cello, and I took cello lessons in my primary school and then through secondary school as well. So, you know, the days of free music lessons, I don't know whether they still exist, but I feel really lucky that I had that. I mean, I haven't played it for quite a while, but yeah.
But you could whip out a cello, maybe.
And scratch out a few strangled cat-sounding notes. Yeah, I could probably torture you with that.
Did you ever get a chance to perform? Because De Montfort Hall is quite a famous Leicester venue.
I did. I was in the Leicestershire Schools Symphony Orchestra, and the Leicestershire Schools Training Orchestra, and then I went into the Symphony Orchestra, and we performed at the De Montfort Hall. Yeah, I remember doing. I think it was the Titus Overture. Mozart's Titus Overture.
Wow, quite hefty.
Pretty good. And Sibelius, we did Finlandia as well. So yeah, but I think I was one of those guys playing at the back where you just sort of move your bow around in the right way so that
you
it
actually
looks
playing?
like... I thought I was
This
playing.
Your first,
I don't know.
Sort of dramatic
if the rest of the
encounter
orchestra
miming.
had stopped, maybe it wouldn't have sounded great. But I certainly looked like I was playing.
And obviously, your name is Richard. And there's someone very famous called Richard who was recently discovered
Richard
in
Madeley,
Leicester.
I know, that's amazing, isn't it? No.
Also Richard III.
Yeah.
Are you named after Richard III? Is that where you are?
I am, yeah. I was born on the 22nd of August, and that was when he died on the battlefield at Bosworth. It's one of those history questions that I always got right. But my dad was really into Richard III, so he chose that name. I think if I hadn't been born on the 22nd of August, I might have been called Russell.
Do you know, I'm born on the 22nd of August.
Are you?
And I'm
You're
not called Richard.
Richard.
What happened?
I don't know.
Maybe
We
it was
could think
the
of
whole
another
girl
name for you.
thing.
Elizabeth.
Yeah. And were you watching? I mean, were you aware of this story unravelling in Leicester?
I was in New Zealand at the time, so I was receiving the news sort of sporadically. But yeah, I'm kind of fascinated and thrilled that they found him and have laid him to rest, or whether that's still up in the air as to where he's going to be laid to rest. But yeah, I still haven't had a chance to visit the site yet, but I will.
And have you ever played Richard III? Is that something that you would ever want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about it for years. I've talked about trying to resurrect a story, not Shakespeare's play, but something that was closer to the truth. Whether or not that will happen, I don't know. But I'd certainly like to have a crack at the Shakespeare. I think he wrote a great pantomime about Richard III, and it's always worth kind of looking at that before you go and tell the true story.
Yeah. And in The Hobbit, your character, you look incredibly different to the way you look in front of me now. I just wonder, your family, when they watch The Hobbit, what does your mum think?
I have no idea.
Have you ever asked
I
her?
have no idea. I mean, I think they came to set, and they one of the things that my dad said, he said, how have they made your eyes closer together? And I was like, well, that is one way of looking at it, because they made our heads look bigger, and they gave us fake forehead and nose, and I guess it did sort of make my eyes look closer together. But I could see my dad was baffled, like he thought that they'd somehow stuck my head in a vice and squeezed my eyes close together.
And could you take on, you mentioned obviously the fact that you loved The Hobbit as you were growing up, and another one of your roles, quite a famous one, was the Robin Hood mythology. Was that something that you had also grown up with Nottingham not being that far from where you
Yeah, I
were a
mean,
boy?
less so. I mean, we visited Sherwood Forest, and we went to the Great Oak as kids on a school trip. What was interesting about working on Robin Hood was trying to find any kind of source material, because I think it is myth and legend, and there really is only one book which is like an extended poem, which I found, but it wasn't quite enough. I wanted to find the original story of Robin Hood, and it doesn't exist. It comes in many forms, and it's a sort of tale told in different cultures in the same way. It seems to be woven into lots of different mythology, but yeah, it was nice to play that character that was so sort of centrally based. And there's now an airport named after him, which is always handy, isn't it?
It is. Have you ever flown into the...
I think I've flown out of there once.
And do you ever visit Leicester?
I do.
No.
I'm working in the UK at the moment. I'm working up in Leeds, and I've visited Leicester quite a few times, but mainly to the countryside. I haven't been into the city centre for a while.
Is there anything that you miss when you're sort of far away and you think of Would you consider
Pork
it home?
pies.
Really?
Pork pies, Melton Mowbray pork pies. Even that's not really Leicestershire, is it? Is it?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, pork pies and red Leicester cheese. It's mainly food. Mainly food, fish and chips and newspaper and things like that.
So if I could bring you one thing from Leicestershire next
Pork pie.
time, pork pie.
Yeah, and a piece of Stilton.
And a piece of Stilton. You're on.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
Deal.